Let's talk about the Boston Bruins organization. God, do they love to fire coaches left and right and blame them on the way out. It's always the coach's problem. Never the GM's problem or the owner's problem. No. It's the coach. They've been doing that since the frickin' 80s. This organization has. Nothing has changed. And it won't change anytime soon. Why? Don Sweeney has just signed a 2-year extension because he's going into his final year. And I'm pretty sure that it's 2 years after this year. And so when you're looking at Don Sweeney's tenure, and again, as we all remember, Jeremy Jacobs loved to boast about the fact that, hey, Don Sweeney's got the most wins, the most points, or he's got the most points, tied for the most wins than any GM from 2015 on. And when you look at the tenure, it's not a terrible tenure. Started from the 2015-16 season. Of course, we missed the playoffs with 93 points. But then the following year, we've been in the playoffs every single year except for this year. So basically from the start of Don Sweeney's tenure to this past season, in between, we've made the playoffs every single time. 9 straight years. And we had one really good year where we made the Cup final, lost in 7 to the freaking Blues. And I will say this to my dying breath, Jordan Binnington sold his soul to win that game. But I digress. So why do it? Why now? The Bruins are obviously looking for more. They're looking for a coach. Excuse me. They're looking for a head coach right now. You had Rick Tosche say, nope, I'm not going to Boston. You had Mike Sullivan, who's coached here once before. He got hired by the Rangers 5 days after he got let go by Pittsburgh. You had coaches right there, but Don Sweeney, no, we're going to take our time. We're going to understand. And this is all with him going into his final year. And with that being said, I can't help but wonder if Don did make the phone call, said, hey, Mike, would you be interested? And he said no for maybe a number of reasons, but one of them being Sweeney's going into his final year. That means if he doesn't get retained, then whoever takes the head coaching job can easily sit there and be like, and can be on the chopping block himself next year for no fault of his own, except for the fact that there's a new GM in town and he doesn't like that head coach's style of play. So the Bruins, on the one hand, which is what I see a lot of people, discussing, that, it had to be done. Re-signing Sweeney had to be done. Where I was under the impression that, no, it didn't have to be done. I would have let him go after this past season. And then you get the other faction who's like, you can't fire Don Sweeney because he traded everybody at the trade deadline. That's not, he sold everybody off. Of course we were going to make the playoffs. That's correct. Because the reason why I would sell him, why I'd fire him, had nothing to do with him selling the assets that he did come this past trade deadline. Not for nothing. I think it turned into some pretty good stuff. Getting a first pick from the Leafs, getting a first rounder from the Panthers with Brad Marchand now, making the Eastern Conference Final, him playing all those games and doing so well. It wouldn't be for that. It would be for the sheer fact that we have not had a good draft history under Don Sweeney's tenure. And as I mentioned, when the Bruins organization had their press conference, Kevin Paul DuPont, to his credit, held the Bruins' feet to the fire when he asked Jacobs about, about the 4% increase to us as fans, making that a 13% increase total, which, thank you, Kevin, because the fact that owners never are asked questions about it is foolish. Anytime owners raise prices, everybody should be on them. Why are you doing this? What are you doing this for? You're just pricing out the diehard fans. You're allowing businesses to take over. That's foolish. It's idiotic. But Kevin Paul DuPont, while trying to hold Cam Neely's feet to the fire, I don't think asked the question, got the right question out the way he wanted to. Take a listen to Kevin Paul DuPont asking Cam Neely about the draft.
Neither of them have really been up to expectations, in my opinion.
So can you just elaborate on that, Kevin?
The drafting?
Yeah.
Well,
where we've picked and who we've picked and how it's turned out.
Well, where you've picked is not a lot of top 10 picks, but ultimately
not a lot of first-round picks.
But ultimately, are those draft picks? Have they developed? Have they come in? Have they come online the way you want them? If that's the case, fine. But
well, obviously, you wanted to hit on all your picks. There's no question. I mean.
So the reason why I say that he didn't ask it properly is because, of course, we didn't have many top 10 picks, and I'm glad we didn't have many top 10 picks. I mean, look at this. You're not going to have top 10 picks when you're making the playoffs 9 consecutive years in a row. You're just not. So I kind of get what he was saying, kind of get where he was going with that. But I don't, like I said, I don't think he phrased it properly. If he wants to talk about that, and he kind of got around to it, but when Cam called him out and said, okay, like, what do you mean? Where have we drafted? Who have we drafted? What's going on? Glad you asked, because I got it right here. So everyone brings up the 2015 draft. Cam brought it up himself. When he goes on, even to say, talk about drafting, developing, which I'll get to that in just a minute. But the 2015 draft is the most infamous. Why? Because you had picks 13, 14, 15, right? And you drafted Jacob Zaboral, Jake DeBrusk, and Zach Senyshyn. You want to know who the next 3 picks were? Matthew Barzal, centerman, Kyle Connor, left wing, and Thomas Chabot, defenseman, all of which are all-stars, okay? So you had 3 all-stars right in a row after your 3 failed picks. And not for nothing, DeBrusk was average, slightly above average at best. And would I dump him for all 3 of those guys? In a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. Then in that same draft, they also could have had Brock Bozer, who's a right wing, at 20, who got taken at 23. Travis Konechny, centerman, who got taken at 24 for Philly. And then Sebastian Aho, who was taken 35th overall. So you had the guys. And Cam goes on, you had plenty of opportunities. Cam goes on to discuss how, it wasn't fair. Don had no idea, about being a GM, and, he wasn't prepared, and blah, blah, blah. Just trying to give him excuses to say it. And it's 2015. You blew that royally. And okay, if you want me to take you at your word that Don wasn't ready to draft, and that, yes, he was scouting, but he wasn't, prepared to take, certain guys, that they stood in the back and they didn't, go up come back, discuss, go up, and do all that for 3 straight picks, fine. I'll take you at your word for it. But here's the kicker. Then in 2016, the following year, you take Charlie McAvoy and Trent Frederick. All right, Charlie McAvoy's been a very good player. I'm starting to doubt whether or not he's, the number one defenseman you can build around. But the other 2 picks in the first round that were taken after McAvoy you could have had were Jacob Chychrun and Tage Thompson. Now, some have said Chychrun might be better than McAvoy, and Tage Thompson, I would take him over Trent Frederick any day of the week. In terms of where Tage was taken compared to Trent, he was taken several spots ahead of Trent Frederick, but they were both listed as centermen. So you could have packaged a deal to move up in the draft to jump Buffalo to take Tage Thompson. Just saying. Now, would you have that, third line fighter that you had in Frederick? No. You would have had a 6'6" beast, on your third line or maybe even second line. But Trent Frederick, break your heart, but he's not a first-round talent. I don't know what they saw, but he was clearly not a first-round talent. Then in 2017, take Urho Vakanainen. And remind me, how's he doing right now? That's right. You trade him to Anaheim, got Hampus Lindholm, and he's okay. I think he's got a couple hundred games under his belt, but that's about it. He's never really done anything much. And yeah, you got Hampus Lindholm out of the deal for it, which that was a good deal. You made the right move. You didn't rely on a kid who didn't really have much potential in the league. And you got a established defenseman out of the deal. But you could have had Robert Thomas 2 picks later, or you could have solidified your goaltending and taken Jake Ottinger, who some argue is the best goalie in the NHL right now. That's right. You could have had Jake Ottinger and not had to deal with this nonsense of Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman. You would have had to deal with the Swayman drama if you took Jake Ottinger. And then if you took Robert Thomas, you took a scorer. Instead of taking Urho Vakanainen, you had the guys right there to pick. You just chose poorly every single time. 2018, you didn't have a first rounder. 2019, you took Johnny Beecher at 30. How's he doing? Has he played much? No. Then in 2020, you took Lohrei at 58th. I think there's still development with him, and he's shown some bright spots. Glad for. But and again, there's not much left out there. 2021, Fabian Lysell at 21 overall. Where the hell has this kid been? Everybody's talking about, Lysell. Every single time at the start of camp. And then when the season comes around, gone. Nowhere to be found. He's in Providence. The kid's been in Providence since day one. And I don't know if he's ever going to come out of Providence. I don't know if it's because he's too small. He doesn't have the hands. He doesn't have, he can't play defense. Which, you know what? If you can't play defense, sometimes it just happens. If you have an elite goal scorer, then you sacrifice a little bit on the defense. But for the love of God, what are we going to do with this kid? And then the funny part is, 2 picks later, Dallas again took Wyatt Johnson, who has been lighting it up since the year after he was taken. He's been unbelievable in Dallas. So can we please, Cam, like this is the thing. You want to bring up the draft history? There it is. Yeah, you took Carlo. Yeah, okay, yeah, I think he's definitely a second line D pair, but he's been hampered extremely by injuries and all his concussions. And yeah, I'm glad we got a first rounder back for him, from Toronto. But it's you take these guys and you want to boast about how, oh yeah, we took all these guys. A bunch of them are playing and have played in the league. Yeah, but Cam, they're not good. They're not good. Just because you're playing in the league doesn't mean. And again, no team is gonna have all-stars top to bottom. They're not. I totally understand that. Between the salary cap and just the talent level, no doubt about it. I get it. I really do. But we're coming into Don Sweeney's 11th draft. And you couldn't have a guy just fall into your lap like that. 10 years of drafting and nothing. Okay, I'll give you McAvoy. Great. You got McAvoy. No one else? No one. Don Sweeney, to his credit, can go out and make some draft day trades, make some trades to get established players in the league. Very good, some of which are elite. And I'll give him that credit. I will. But when it comes to the draft, I mean, my God, this is why it bothers me that he's still here, because I don't trust him. I don't. And I mean, do you? Let me know down below. Let me know. I'd love to hear it, because I don't. And again, Cam talks about the draft and the development. Just it's brief, but take a listen to what he had to say about drafting and developing.
Our drafting and developing, the narrative there is a little off, and it's been going on for quite some time. Goes back to 15, and
and like I said, I don't agree. I agree that the drafting and developing is off, but it's not a little off. It's a lot of this team has not come up through the minors. No. Okay. Yeah, actually, a good portion of this team, I don't know if it's a majority, but a good portion of this team has not come up from being drafted and making the team and blah, 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 blah. Going out and making a name for themselves. Don Sweeney has had to go to work to establish this team through free agency and through trades. It's not the ideal way to make a team. And I feel like it is finally paying off in the wrong way, in the wrong sense. So it's, in terms of building a team, you got to know how to draft. And now that you got the friggin' 7th overall pick, which I hate draft lotteries. I will always be against draft lotteries. I don't care if a team tanks, because the players that are playing the game don't want to tank because they know that it could cost them their jobs. So they don't want to tank. They will, because they suck, but they don't want to. And that's why, I sit there and I look at it going, we don't need lotteries. We don't. And so the Bruins, with a top 10 pick, they not only need to hit it, but this kid needs to be a day one Boston Bruin. He can't go down to Providence. He can't. This kid needs to be playing day one. I hope they get the right guy, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens.